Well, buyers are back in Sydney, forcing house prices even higher. And data shows the city has returned to year-on-year growth, up just under 1%. And for more, we are joined by REA Chief Economist Nerida Conisbee. So buyers are back, Nerida.
Yeah, look, they are well and truly back. We've been seeing it for quite some time, pretty much since May, once the federal election was won by the coalition. So buyers have been surging since that time. We've still got a shortage of stock on the market. So when we have a look at listing volumes, they're still well down. And finally, this is starting to lead to year-on-year price growth. Because
it was flat as a tack, wasn't it, before the election? It really was.
Yeah, look, it was really bad news. I mean, when I was back in January, when we were looking at all the data, it was looking very, very negative. We had a Royal Commission on where there was a lot of problems with building quality throughout Sydney in particular. We also had a lot of fears around what some of the changes for tax incentives for investors. So things were very negative in January. I think we're looking at a far more positive 2020.
And let's have a look at some of the capital cities. The housing shortage in Hobart again leading to an acceleration of prices.
Yeah, so Hobart has been one of the strongest performers over the past 6 years. So we did see an uplift in pricing of around 45% between 2011 and 2017. It came back about 1.5%, but it is now surging ahead again. So unlike Sydney, which is a little bit more driven by access to finance issues, Hobart does also have a housing shortage, which does seem to be leading to quite a different situation there.
What about some of the regional areas across Australia? We've seen Hobart, we've seen Launceston, rural Tasmania, for instance.
Yeah, look, Tasmania is quite a star performer if you're looking at it from a perspective of price growth. I think one of the problems for Hobart, though, is that it does have a rental crisis at the moment, and we're seeing a 9% pickup in rents. We've got a homelessness problem. There's very low rental rates. So, I think on one hand, there's a lot of positivity about the Hobart market, but on the other hand, I think for a lot of people living there, there's starting to emerge affordability issues and also a rental crisis.
Two beautiful places in Australia, Noosa in Queensland, Surfers Paradise in Queensland. Which one's better?
Yeah, so we're comparing beaches at the moment. Last week we did Manly versus Bondi. This week we're looking at Noosa versus Surfers Paradise. And Surfers Paradise is probably the most fascinating area in terms of data in Australia. We do get some really interesting things that are happening there. One of the things we do find is that Melbourne people show a much stronger desire for the Noosa market. They don't like Gold Coast so much. Sydney people are pretty indifferent not indifferent, but they like both areas, so that's quite interesting. In terms of pricing, we can see that Surfers Paradise houses are far more expensive than Noosa houses, but get to apartments, and apartments are almost double the price in Noosa compared to Surfers Paradise.
I find them very hard to split. I love them both. Noosa, the Noosa River. Looking forward to going up to the Magic Millions in January and bringing people all the latest from that from around the Gold Coast and Surfers. They're two beautiful parts of the world. Now, overseas. The overseas search is back here in Australia.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, we've seen October. We saw a year-on-year flat conditions from overseas search. So China in particular has been dropping significantly over the past 2 years. We've seen very little search coming out of China since the property boom ended in Australia, but they did come back in November. We saw a significant uptick in property seekers from China. Hong Kong is another one, though, that continues to be very, very high. So since June, when the riots started, we did see a big pickup in Hong Kong search. We know that a lot of developers are over in Hong Kong at the moment looking to sell product in that market, and it is likely that many of them will head to China as well.
And just finally, Nerida, how many auctions do we have today, and how can we compare it to perhaps this time last year?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Melbourne last week, we saw a higher level of more auctions taking place than we saw at the same time last year. This weekend, still quite a lot of auctions taking place, but they are less than what we're seeing. So we still do have a problem with listing volumes. There's still very little stock out there. So buyers are back, but still a problem with sellers.
Nerida, are the banks getting any better with giving people money? Are they loosening up after the Royal Commission at all?
Yeah, look, they are. I mean, it's not moving that quickly, and it is interesting. We have a mortgage broking business, Smartline, and talking to them, they are finding that some banks are starting to ease up. The issue that they're not they're not changing, or most of them aren't changing on, is the looking at people's expenses and really putting those under a microscope. So, I think on one hand we will see a continued easing up of finance, but it won't get back to where it was in 2015. The other big change for home loans, though, is the introduction of digital banks, and we're starting to see quite a few of them enter the home loan market because of open banking. So that'll be interesting. We know in the UK when open banking was introduced and digital banks started to come into the market, it did lead to a very, very competitive situation for the home loan market. So it will be interesting to see if that happens here in next year.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. Thank you as always, Nerida Conisbee. See you again next Saturday.